Hi, I'm Sarah from the upcoming. A pleasure to have you both here with us in beautiful Cannes. Maybe you could begin with a brief introduction to your film. For people who don't know anything about it, what can they expect?
If we could tell them what to expect with words, then we wouldn't have made the film. We find it quite hard to make films, and words are much easier, so if we had words at hand, then we wouldn't make the film. But I suppose we're attempting to show the human body in a way that it's never been seen before, and to allow us to sense its simultaneous fragility and resilience, its interconnectedness with other bodies, both benevolent and malevolent, both suffering and desiring, both active and passive, both frustrated and resentful and helpful in lots of different ways. But it's trying to give us a representation of a body that we recognize to be true and authentic, but which we've never been able to see before.
I also think that there's nothing really rigid or to be expected, in the sense that it's a film that will speak to every single viewer in a very different way, because obviously everybody has a body and everybody has a very peculiar relationship to his body, and also there are like really some people who are surprised how they were ready to explore and discover their inside. So, I mean, but this is true that one of the hope was also to show the body in a different way, unfamiliar way, but also at the end that maybe the effect would be that we would have a different sense of our interiority, subjectivity, and to our relationship to the world, in relation to the world.
Can you tell us a bit about the title and why you chose that title and what it sort of reflects about the film?
The title is a working title. So we always start our film with a working title that we always think that we're gonna jettison to find the right one, because since we don't write anything, we don't know exactly what the film will be, and usually we don't know until the very end of the film. So that was the working title, because we had this idea that with the new medical technology and the ability to visualize the body, we could make today, we could borrow those tools to the medical world and bring it to the cinema world, and that it would be a sort of 21st century exploration of anatomy, but with the difference between. So, De Humani Corporis Fabrica is the title of a book that is the founding book of anatomy from Andrea Vesalius from the 16th century, and so that's that would be, even if it sounds a little bit pretentious. But we kept this title. The working title became the title. It could be a book of anatomy, but adding the sound, the texture, the movements. But maybe you have another answer, no?
And I'm so curious to know, the practicalities of shooting it. Going to these 8 different hospitals, and then also, obviously using the small cameras. Can you tell us a bit about how that all worked and your decisions about, focusing on the subject matter rather than, let's say, talking heads or interviews?
I don't think we'd ever focus on talking heads. We did once because a friend dared us to make a talking head film, but it was about a living cannibal, and we made him totally out of focus. But in this case, as in most of our work, we're not interested in talking heads, especially in non-fiction, when people just give you this bullshit, they try to tell you about their lives, and they're just lying through their teeth, or they're propagandizing, or they're putting themselves on display, hamming it up for the camera, or trying to present themselves in a way that they want to be seen. We're interested in reality that's kind of unvarnished, where people aren't reinventing and performing exclusively for the camera. In this case, most of the imagery is medical imagery that we were present at and that we recorded while the doctors were looking at the screens in order to use whatever information it could help them guide the surgeries and interventions they were doing. But we also filmed with a lipstick camera that an engineer friend of ours made, especially for the film, that's about half the size of an electronic cigarette. So it's kind of a laparoscopic camera, but it wasn't sterile. We could put it in a sterile sheath when we had to film inside the sterile operational field. But in general, we intertwined our paralaparoscopic footage with the interior laparoscopic footage in such a way that people would question this supposedly inviolable membrane of our skin that distinguishes our interiority with other people's bodies and the rest of the world. And then, during the editing, the whole question was just to find the right relative weight to afford the different kinds of imagery of, the original idea was that we would never leave the inside of the body, that everything would be inside the body, filmed with lots of different contemporary medical imaging technologies. And then we decided we also wanted to be able to get outside the body and to put the interior of the body in dialogue with other bodies, human and non-human.
And what do you hope people will take away from watching the film? Because in some senses it can feel like a voyage of discovery. People think they're familiar with their bodies, but really they're not. So there's kind of perhaps a visceral response to that, and discovering something they didn't know. But then there's also themes that you touch on, such as the pressures that health systems are under in terms of being underfunded. So there's kind of that other element to it as well. So what do you hope people will take away?
No, I need to think. I mean,
you never know. I know probably most filmmakers might be able to answer that question, whether they're fiction filmmakers or documentary filmmakers, but we don't really know. We don't have a particular hope. We kind of want our films, insofar as our films feature human beings, we would like the people in our films to recognize themselves, to feel that it was a portrait that was legitimate and valid, that they weren't misrepresented. But we're not making our films just for our subjects, and we never second guess what the larger public will think of it. We're not making it for a cinema public or a television public, or we're not making them for ourselves, but we're our first viewers and our last viewers in a sense. But most of our principles are unconscious, so we don't really know what even we're hoping for ourselves. I suppose we feel that, like, we're in Cannes. It's one of the most obscene spaces on the face of the earth. It's a space of a display of vulgarity that you get nowhere else on earth. Multiple forms of vulgarity, exacerbated in these 2 weeks by the Cannes Film Festival. That is the most vulgar film festival that humans have ever constructed. And everything is just filled with conspicuous consumption and conspicuous spectacles of exhibitionism and display of different kinds of celebrities and everything else. And there are so many films in the world, good and bad, but there are just so many on every possible subject. And these films are commodities too, and they're spectacles, and they're there to make money, and they're there to rip people off. And I suppose if we're part of this process, if we ourselves are trying to inflict a film on the world, and it is a form of affliction and infliction on others, then there has to be a good reason for it. And I suppose the only reason that motivates us is to try to come up with a film that is unlike any other film before that's been made on the subject. All films are about bodies. There are 1,000,001 films about bodies. There's no point in having another film about the medical world, about hospitals, about surgeries, about human bodies. There's nothing but films about those subjects unless we can do it in a way that allows us to be reconciled with our bodies in all of their pathologies and all of our perversities, but in a way that we recognize to be authentic, but which we have never actually seen before on screen.
I cannot say better than that, for sure.
But I think that's true, isn't it?
Completely. And yeah, I think we're also hoping that the political, subtext will be heard. Like beside.
The political subtext is super obvious in a way, which is that people love to complain, and people complain with reason and without reason. Like in the NHS, people will complain too, with just as much reason as in France. But it's also part of this process of capitalism, which we're participating in here, which is that all the money going into medicine is increasingly going into the technology at the expense of the human quality of care as well, which is disastrous for the sense of well-being of the patients and of the nursing staff and the medical staff.
In that sense, talking about Cannes, lots of people are putting your film into dialogue with Crimes of the Future. I wondered what your sort of reaction to that is, and whether you see that there's kind of some commonality or something that you can put into conversation.
We haven't seen the film. We will, I guess, but not yet. They put the two films were released in the same day, so there was no way for us to go see it.
So it'll be interesting to.
But I saw that a lot of people put the two films in dialogue, and so we'll see the film.
And just maybe on the point that you were making, I don't know if you saw Triangle of Sadness as well, which there felt like it was the elephant in the room perhaps, because it was very critical of kind of the super rich and the elite, and that film showing out in Cannes to an audience of people, probably those exact people. So sometimes there can be these moments of, it's not quite epiphany, is it? But these clashing moments where there's some self-awareness perhaps.
I actually would like to see the film. I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
But by all accounts, the Cannes viewing public, the yacht owners, the super rich, the oligarchs, they can watch this and laugh at representations of themselves, but whether it will actually change their being in the world, the way they behave in the world, their patterns of consumption seems distinctly unlikely.
And just very quickly, how do you see this film as what might be the threads or the way you choose the particular subjects in each of your films, and if you've already know what you're going to do for your next one?
We have a vague idea. We've had an idea for a while, but we don't know exactly, where and how and the form it will take. But it will be. We have a dream of. Hold the microphone. We have a dream of rethinking. You don't want to.
It's like talking about a lover. It's like talking about somebody who's not your lover, but who you love and who you're obsessed with before you've ever been intimate with them. You're polluted. You'll condemn it.
Okay, so shall I lie and say,
Either say nothing or say something else.
Okay, so I'm gonna lie. We want to make a film about the industry of socks making.
Red Sox.
Thank you so much for sharing all that with me, and enjoy presenting your film here. Thank you so much. Cheers.